When this young woman found an old picture of her mother during a garage sale, she had no idea that her life was about to change forever. The picture itself wasn't anything special. It was old and a bit worn down. But the message that was written on the back would set this woman on a journey with a shocking revelation at the girl finds old baby picture of her mother. What she discovered will shock you. A charming old two-story house was being invaded by a ragtag army of nostalgic locals, bargain hunters, and curious passers-by. All looking for a treasure among the rubbish. It was the quintessential garage sale scene, brimming with an eclectic collection of memories in the form of dusty books, worn-out toys, vintage clothing, and unloved pieces of furniture. The event was orchestrated by the home's new tenant, a 29-year-old woman named Barbara. She had taken up residence in the home a couple of years back. Barbara was not just an ordinary woman. She was imbued with an innate curiosity that has often been described as insatiable. Her childhood was filled with detective games and grand adventures, revolving around the intricate mysteries that plagued their home. Mysteries were as mundane as her father's missing house keys or as intriguing as the disappearing cookies from their jar. Her father's keys were eventually unearthed from the backyard, hidden treasures hoarded by their mischievous golden retriever. The cookie thief turned out to be their affable neighbor's kid, who slyly executed secret missions left traces of his cookie heists only a keen observer like Barbara could piece together. However, these childhood games of detective work were only mere practices, building up to the ultimate test of her sleuthing skills that were about to unfold. Barbara was now the matriarch of her childhood home. Her parents had retired to a serene cabin up north, entrusting their precious family home to Barbara's care. The sense of nostalgia and familiarity with the place was comforting. It was her haven of memories, a haven she was now sharing with her own little family. But, despite the passing of time and the new residents, the house still clung to the remnants of its past inhabitants. Amidst the organized chaos of the garage sale, Barbara found herself drawn to an old, battered cardboard box labeled Old Family Photos. Intrigued, she sat down on the concrete floor of the garage, the box in her lap. As she sifted through the vintage photos, her heart filled with warmth. There was her father in his youth, her grandparents smiling broadly, her as a bubbly toddler with chocolate-smeared cheeks. However, one particular photo captured her attention. It was an old photo of her as a baby. The picture wasn't unusual, just a baby looking wide-eyed into the camera. Nothing weird about this. But what did startle her was what was written on the back. It said, "Rose and Meline at Auntie's home." Rose, she knew, because that was her mother's name. But Meline was an enigma. Her mother always told her everything, but this name was a mystery. This discovery planted the seeds of a mystery that Barbara couldn't ignore. Her mother was a woman of simple tastes and humble beginnings. Barbara had grown up hearing stories of her mother's modest childhood, filled with familial love and support. But there was never a mention of a Meline. Who was she? Why was her mother in her house? And why did her mother never mention her? Thus began Barbara's journey, a journey that took her through the winding paths of her family's past. It led her to dusty attics, distant relatives' homes, and even to far-off lands she never thought she would set foot in. The mystery of Meline evolved, unraveling not just a secret kept hidden for decades, but also revealing a different side of her mother that Barbara had never known. The sweet, simple mother Barbara thought she knew was gradually replaced by a woman with an intricate past, a woman who had made difficult choices and sacrifices, and who had kept secrets that had the power to change everything Barbara knew about her family. This story was a testament to a daughter's curiosity and a mother's love, a saga that was just beginning to unfold. Barbara first set her sights on her siblings Uncle Jake and Aunt Lydia, in the hopes of unearthing some information. Uncle Jake, known for his exuberant personality and heartwarming laughter, displayed an uncharacteristic reticence when asked about Meline. Aunt Lydia, the ever-tender, amiable woman, was taken aback by the mere mention of the name. Both claimed ignorance, affirming they knew nothing about any Meline. But the hushed whispers and stolen glances exchanged between the two told a different story. They were hiding something, but why? The mystery only seemed to deepen. Over the following weeks, Barbara reached out to each of her relatives. Starting with her mother's siblings, she probed gently for information about Meline. But every conversation felt rehearsed as if they had been warned and prepared for her questions. Each claimed ignorance about Madeline's existence, always cutting the conversation short and leaving her more confused and frustrated. Barbara, unfazed by these setbacks, decided to dig deeper. Her next move was to visit her grandmother's place. The house was a worn-out but proud testimony to her family's history. Barbara hoped that she might uncover some information here. And that's exactly what happened. Among her grandmother's treasures, she found a box filled with old letters. As she leafed through the pile, a single worn envelope addressed to her mother, Rose, caught her eye. It was signed simply, M. The handwriting was exquisite, each letter drawn with the elegance of a bygone era. Inside, a letter written in the same elegant handwriting contained cryptic phrases and seemingly innocent anecdotes. But the emotion between the lines was palpable. The letter hinted at a deep bond between the author and Barbara's mother and its secrets that were too heavy for a young Rose to bear. The mystery deepened as Barbara unearthed more letters in that box, all signed with the same elusive initial, M. Her thoughts raced and her heart pounded. Was it possible? Could M stand for Meline? Fueled by this revelation, Barbara decided to make the long journey to the location mentioned in the letters, a small town in the south where time seemed to move at a leisurely pace. As she drove into the town, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of déjà vu. In the town, she visited the local registry office. And with the help of a sympathetic clerk, she finally found a birth record for Meline. The document confirmed that Meline was her mother's sister. The truth, as it unfolded, was far from what Barbara had expected. Meline was not just a distant relative, but her mother's own flesh and blood, her sister. The impact of this revelation was profound. Questions swirled in Barbara's mind. Why would her mother hide the existence of her sister? What had happened between them that was so dire, it erased Meline from her mother's life? Chasing the clues led Barbara to an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town. As she stood outside, looking at the crumbling facade, she could almost feel the echoes of laughter and tears. The memories of love and heartbreak that must have been a part of this house. Her detective mind took over, and it just knew that this home belonged to Meline. To the sister her mother never mentioned. Somehow she just knew. She felt a shiver run down her spine as she stepped inside. Inside the house, dust and cobwebs clung to the worn-out furniture and faded photographs. The house seemed to hold its breath as if waiting to share its secrets. In a corner, Barbara found an old photo album. As she flipped through the pages, she saw a picture of a young woman, her features a mirror image of her mother's, smiling at the camera. It was a photo of Meline. The house was filled with old photos, but no actual Meline herself. Among the photos, she found more letters. Each one filled with longing and regret, each one a plea for reconciliation. They were addressed to Rose, her mother, and signed by Meline. This was proof, undeniable evidence, that Meline was her aunt, her mother's sister, the one who had been hidden from the family history. The letters spoke of deep affection between the sisters. But there seemed to be a bitterness hinting from the letters. No bitterness from Meline to Rose, but a lot of bitterness the other way around. Some of the letters asked Rose, her mother, to return to the fold to heal the rift that had torn them apart. Yet, for reasons Barbara could not fathom, these letters were never sent. They lay there in the abandoned house, their words of love and longing echoing in the silent rooms. The magnitude of this discovery weighed heavy on Barbara's heart. She was beginning to piece together the woman her mother once was, a woman so different from the one she knew. This brought her to a new mystery. Who was Meline, and why did her existence cause so much turmoil? As Barbara moved through the rooms of the house, she stumbled upon a room that held the most intriguing secrets of all. In the room, a dusty wooden desk dominated the space. There was a simple elegance to the desk, an elegant veneer that belied its age. This was Meline's study. She felt a shiver of excitement as she stepped into the room. It was a room filled with stories and secrets waiting to be uncovered. On the walls were rows of photographs, most of them depicting scenes from Meline's life. But there was one collection that shocked Barbara. There, in a cabinet on the wall, framed by the soft afternoon light, were photographs of Barbara herself. Barbara's hands trembled as she picked up a photograph. It was a recent picture, one she hadn't even known existed. She felt a chill down her spine. Was Meline watching her? How had she managed to take these photographs without her knowledge? Her mind was a whirlwind of questions. She couldn't comprehend how Meline, whom she had never met, had these pictures of her. Had her life been under silent observation all these years? Dazed, Barbara decided to leave the house. As she walked towards the front door that she had left ajar, a sudden movement outside caught her eye. Standing at the entrance was a woman who looked remarkably like her mother, the resemblance so uncanny it took her breath away. The woman looked about 60, the same age her mother would be now. Her heart pounded in her chest as she walked slowly toward the woman. She looked like a ghost from the past, a reflection of her mother, a mirror image of the woman Barbara knew so well. The shock of the resemblance rendered her speechless for a moment. When she finally found her voice, she asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Meline. Are you Meline?" The woman simply looked at her, her gaze steady, her expression unreadable. This was where Barbara's journey ended, for now. The woman standing in front of her, the mirror image of mother, was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new chapter. The connection between Rose and Meline, the secrets of the past that all came out after this encounter. The woman smiled a sad smile. Her deep-set eyes filled with familiar warmth. "Yes, Barbara, I am Meline." Meline's voice was quiet, but her gaze was unflinching. There was a world of regret, sorrow, and longing in her voice. For a moment, Barbara felt a rush of anger, bitterness, and betrayal. She had a million questions, and every single one of them started with why. But before Barbara could utter a word, Meline held up a hand, her eyes beseeching. "I know you have questions, Barbara. And I owe you the answer," she said, leading her back into the house. They moved to the living room, where Meline began unfolding the layers of her life, revealing a past that Barbara had been blissfully ignorant of. And as Meline sat Barbara down in her house, she calmly explained everything. She unveiled a past where she, Meline, had been a rebellious, stubborn young woman, where she had gone against her family's wishes and fallen for a man who was as cruel as he was charming. He had a spell on Meline, a spell she couldn't break free from, even when it cost her everything. Her family, her sister, and her own child. As Meline told her story, Barbara sat in shock. A child. Her child. The reality of the situation slowly sank in. And then I did the unthinkable. I got pregnant and my boyfriend did not want me to keep the baby. He made me get rid of it. I was afraid of the consequences, so I listened. So one day, I dropped the baby off at the only place I knew it would be safe. At the house of my sister Rose. And that baby girl I dropped off at her doorstep, that baby was you, Barbara. A cold silence filled the room as Barbara processed the words. Her heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment, she felt like the room was spinning. She was the baby. The baby her mother had always loved with all her heart. But her mother was not her mother. She was her aunt. Her biological mother was Meline. Meline explained how her relationship with Rose had been irreparably damaged. How she had tried to make amends, to fix what she had broken, but Rose's heart was too filled with anger and hurt. Meline had chosen a man over her own family, over her own flesh and blood. And even though she was not with that man anymore, the effects of her decision still lingered. Barbara listened as Meline recounted how she had attempted to reconnect with her sister, apologize for her choices, and to mend the broken bonds. But every letter she had sent had gone unanswered. And after the 100th letter, Meline had stopped trying. She had accepted her fate and chosen exile, living on the fringes of her family's life, watching from a distance, her heart filled with regret and longing. Barbara sat in the chair in stunned silence, her mind buzzing with unanswered questions and unresolved emotions. And then, she did something no one could have expected. She rose from the chair and walked towards Meline. The older woman looked at her, surprised, but didn't move. Then, Barbara reached out and wrapped her arms around Meline. Tears welled up in her eyes as she held her biological mother, the woman who had given her up all those years ago. Meline cried, letting out years of unexpressed emotions and feeling the pain. Barbara promised that she was going to make amends. She took Meline to her car and together they drove back home. Back to where her sister Rose lived. At first, Rose was resistant, she had not forgiven her sister yet. But Barbara eventually convinced her. Barbara, who one gave birth to, and Barbara who the other had raised. They all became a family again in the end.